Thank you for joining us to the 40th edition of the Vancouver International Film Festival. You've just watched Bootlegger, and we are very excited to have Carolyn Monnet join us. Carolyn.
Hello, everyone.
Really tremendously honored to have the world premiere of this film. We're excited to have shared it with our audiences. This is your first feature film. And I know that much of your short work in the past has kind of used a motif of journeys in some respects. And this is another film that does kind of hinge upon a trip, upon an expedition of sorts, return home. And wondering, like, what was the maybe the kernel of an idea that put this film into motion for you? Was it the idea of someone returning to this community that they once knew very intimately?
At the very beginning of the film, or the concept of the film started when, at the time, I started writing the film about 5 years ago. But at the time, I was looking at a lot of, at the news, and there were a lot of communities across Canada that were doing referendums about alcohol prohibition in their communities, whether they should permit legal consumption of alcohol or not. And I thought it was a very interesting social topic. Just the idea of voting, 50-50, that it's a clear cut between you're for or you're against. Also looking at, in Canada, when we had the legalization of marijuana, for example, it's kind of a social topic that is a good platform to start looking at other topics and bring in characters into that.
You mentioned that you started writing it 5 years ago. I know the screenplay did win an award at Cannes as well in 2017, I believe. And here we find ourselves 4 years later. So of course, film is always kind of a journey onto its own. So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the process once you had committed this story to paper, kind of bringing it to life. I know my understanding, at least, is that this is one of the first films to shoot in the community of Kitigan-Zibi as well. So maybe just if you could walk us through that a little bit.
The writing process was an interesting one because it started with the concept, the idea of a bootlegger in a community, and just the idea of a referendum in a community and having the community vote on a topic this way. So there wasn't really any characters or journeys. It took a long time to really figure out what I wanted to say and what kind of characters to bring into the story. I knew from the beginning I wanted to be female-led characters. For me, women are very at the forefront of social change, and they're leaders within their communities. So just to do a lot of research around what's happening, in dry communities and just the social structure, doing a lot of research on the Indian Act as well, how it's affected communities over generations. And then I had a co-writer, Daniel Watchorn, who comes from a more music background. He was part of a metal band, and I'm also from a visual arts background. So it was interesting to write together. He would bring some music and I would bring some images, and we would kind of bring it together and figure out the tone of each scene. So rather than start with words, it was more with tone, ambience, aesthetics, mood. And it was an interesting way to work.
That's funny. I didn't know his background was in metal, because there is there is a tenacity to the film as well, like kind of almost a quiet tenacity and this resilience to it as well. So perhaps that is some of that informing the tonal elements of the film.
For me, it's always been important to speak about the resilience of Indigenous people, to show that we're very present in today's landscape, that it's also looking into the future. It's looking at the chaos of the past, but it's with this the will to look at the future and bring some kind of healing resolution. Proposing something, you shake things up to make sure that our voices are heard.
Well, I think the referendum feels like it's an element of self-determination as well, in that respect. Can you speak a little? I'm curious about your experience shooting in the community, and maybe the responsibilities you felt filming there, and maybe working with members of the community as well. I think there's those films that are about community, and then there's also those that engage the community. And this feels like the latter.
So I shot in my grandfather's and mother's community of Kitigan-Zibi, which is located about 2 hours north of Ottawa. And it was very important for me to go to that community. It made sense to go there, just to come back a little bit like Manny, the main character. It was a coming back to the community and reconnecting with family and people there, and the landscape as well. It was interesting. I think they were a little bit intimidated with this, the scope of the industry of the Quebec crew coming into the community. But we tried to involve as many people as possible. And I did a lot of casting prior to shooting there because I wanted to involve, extras and actors from the community and just to have that mix between non-actors and actors. And kind of inspire maybe the youth to get involved into the film business.
I'm curious about your casting of Josephine Bacon as well, because she was in Call Me Human, Kim Obum-Salvin's documentary that actually won an award at VIFF last year, and obviously is such a lovely presence in life and on screen as well.
Josephine, I mean, it made sense when I was thinking about who would play the grandmother's part. She came to my mind right away. She has such a light and a presence and beautiful, the eyes, the face, everything about her is just speaks of light. And I wanted the character to be kind of that, working with her body language as well. She doesn't play very much in fiction films, so I was very honored that she accepted this part. And I casted her before Kim Obum-Salvin's documentary came out. So I knew that she was this kind of grandiose woman already. And it was wonderful working with her. And I think, the two grandparents roles, John, the grandfather that's played by Gilbert Crazy Horse from Kitigan-Zibi, he's a non-actor. It was his first part in a movie. And those two grandfathers for me are the foundation of this film. They're really the pillars for the main character to move forward, to reconnect with her culture, her community. They're the wisdom as well. And they're kind of very silent, but when they speak, they bring that whole, cultural integrity and just guidance. And that's exactly what I was looking for.
If those two figures are kind of the support system for Manny as she returns to the community, you have the characters of Laura and Raymond to kind of serve as antagonists in the tale. And you mentioned when you first knew about the ideas you wanted to explore, but perhaps didn't know quite the story. And I'm just maybe curious to know more about how those two characters took shape as you wrote the script.
I wanted the bootlegger character to be part of this community somehow. It's interesting how Manny and Laura are two opposing characters, but one is from the community, it's her home community. She's coming back to the community, but she's a little bit more disconnected in a way because she doesn't speak the language, whereas the bootlegger has been living there for several years now. Everybody knows her within the community. She started to speak the language. Her partner is from the community. So I wanted to challenge ideas of belonging as well. And yeah, that was that's why I wanted the character of the bootlegger to be played by a non-Indigenous, which was played by Pascale Bussières. And having that, wanting to show also that at the end, she loses everything, but she loses something that was important to her as well, a sense of belonging.
If a metal background informed perhaps the writing of the script, the score that's in the final film as well is kind of a lovely way of drawing out some of the tonal elements of the story. Maybe can you speak a little bit to the process of determining how it would be scored ultimately to kind of layer on that atmosphere over top of it?
Well, you've noticed that the landscape plays a very important part of the film, and I wanted the landscape to be almost like a character that can cry and sing. The editing process, I was listening a lot to Tanya Tagak's music, and it just felt very appropriate to bring that tone I was looking for. She has this sound that is very anchored into the land, but also very modern and punk almost. And I really enjoyed that sound. So working with her and her collaborator Jean Martin was a really fun experience. They got right away what I wanted to express with this. And for me, sound always makes 50% of the film. So we took a lot of time to craft the soundscape of this film.
And I know that I think, touched base about the film spring of last year, perhaps, and it was still, I believe you may have still been editing at that point, but I understand that the editing process, was protracted because of the circumstances we find ourselves in, and you're someone who really, likes to work collaboratively through a process like that. So this was a film that really just needed the time, but actually the close quarters of editors, is that right, to take its final form?
Yeah, it's important for me to work quite instinctively and having conversation with my collaborators. And when the pandemic hit, we had just started the editing process. So working at a distance, having to look at some videos that the editor would send me and send comments was just not the right way for me to work. I need to be in the same room, being able to jam ideas, to try things out. And right away, if it doesn't work, you don't lose too much time going all the way through that idea, right? So editing took much longer than expected. And I think it was a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to take the time I needed to really figure out the story I wanted to tell, just work with the images that we had shot. We shot in very little amount of days. It was a very intensive shoot, very complicated as well with some of, shooting in remote community, remote locations and the barrier of language as well, working in French, English, and Anishinaabe. So it was a pretty intense production. But then in the editing, it was time to just sit down and figure out, do some rewriting, maybe add some sound and just, expand a little bit more the ideas. And I come from a visual background as well. So, the format of a feature film was quite a new experience for me, very different in terms of scheduling and preparation and, time. There's no much room for experimentation when you're doing a feature film, narrative feature anyway, with actors and what it comes with it. So the editing allowed me a little bit more creativity in that sense.
Well, you had mentioned earlier your bringing images to the writing process to work off of and allow those to inspire you. But I was curious to know what were some other elements perhaps of your visual arts practice that you were able to transfer to the feature filmmaking, or did this really represent a drastic departure for you?
I think it was a very new experience for me, a new medium. It's very different than short film even, very new experience for me, but the visual aesthetic is still very present, I think. We put a lot of attention into the set design, the color palettes. I was working with a really great set designer, Louisa Chabas, and we did a lot of tests about lighting tests, and it was just a fun experience to work on those things, and maybe something where I was a little bit more familiar as well. The work in mood and colors and symmetry and the visual aesthetic is still very present, and I'm quite happy with that. And also not to forget the beautiful camera work by Nicola Caneccioni as well.
The film, I guess, Manny, mirrors yourself in some respects, returning to a community that was once home for her, and you mentioned shooting in your grandparents' community. What were perhaps some of the key takeaways for yourself, or some unexpected elements? I mean, you emerged from this experience with a feature film, but for yourself and through the experience of returning to the community and working in that space, were there unexpected takeaways from it?
I would say, obviously, reconnecting with the community and just spending a good amount of time in the community, meeting some distant cousins, and just like really seeing the embrace by the community for this film and the will to participate and the pride of having done this film as well. I think it's the biggest asset. It was interesting also to, the idea that Mani comes back to the community and she doesn't speak her language. And I grew up mostly in French, but my mother's family is English. And, the reality of that region with the three languages is something we hardly ever see on screen. I think it's complex and it's complicated. And I was quite happy to bring that onto the screen. And I see how it's carrying, even after, now that the film is out, the way we all communicate with everyone involved in the film. It has this like three languages, and I think it's super fascinating.
I agree completely, and I think it's one of the wonderful things about the film is the complexity of the three languages, the specificity of the region as well, and yet the universality of the themes in it. And I truly hope that, and I believe that audiences will embrace it because of that universality as well. So we're tremendously honored again to have the film at the festival, and we thank you so much for joining us to share a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.